The remote Salt Flat research camp on Ashera 7th shimmered white under the glare of twin suns. One red-orange, one pale blue. They cast iridescent halos across the vast expanse locals called the deadpan salts. A single biodome and its rudimentary labs huddled near the edge of this desolate landscape, where legend held that ancient bacteria once thrived, but now nothing could survive. Inside the main laboratory dome, Mara Langford adjusted her scanner, wiping sweat from her brow. At 28, the human engineer had been dispatched by Earth's emergency research directive just 3 weeks prior. Yet she still felt like an outsider among the cross-species research team. 5 aliens of 3 different races moved about the sterile lab environment, their deference to the elderly Fisu-Macan xenobiologist apparent in their deferential postures and hushed tones. Dr. Arvek Salran stood before a hovering holographic display, his 4 elongated fingers manipulating the salt field terrain map with practiced precision. The alien professor's reputation preceded him, renowned throughout the galactic university for dismissing any possibility of organic life surviving in extreme saline environments. His theories had shaped xenobiological doctrine for decades. "The salinity index here," he announced, voice resonating with authority as he gestured toward a barren stretch of salt flats, "exceeds 96%. No life survives here. Its salinity kills microbes, let alone higher organisms." The pronouncement was broadcast via holo to screens across the camp, a daily reminder of why they studied this hostile world. Mara said nothing, continuing to tinker with her battered battery pack in the corner. She'd come from a long line of survivors, descendants of an Earth colony that had weathered multiple dead world collapses. Her fingers bore the scars of practical knowledge, of solutions forged in crisis rather than academia. Joran, an Onyxian linguist with translucent skin that revealed the pulse of 3 hearts, sidled up beside her. "You don't look convinced by the professor's declaration," he whispered, his voice a melodic burble. "Earth survived when everyone said it wouldn't," Mara replied simply, connecting another wire to her diagnostic panel. "I've learned to question absolutes, especially about—" Her words died as all power in the dome flickered once and failed. The abrupt silence of ventilation systems felt like a physical pressure against her eardrums. Holographic displays sputtered out, plunging the laboratory into dim emergency lighting that cast long shadows across alien faces, now frozen in surprise. Luma, a fluoro-reptilian geochemist whose scales shifted from green to alarmed orange, checked her portable atmospheric scanner. "Local temperature has spiked by 10 degrees unexpectedly," she announced, voice tight with concern. "Salt crust fissures are emitting lethal saline vapor. The camp's power grid is overwhelmed by heat stress." Dr. Salran's long fingers clutched at a dead console. "Activate the backup generators immediately." Sir," replied Ashilari, his junior xenobiologist assistant. "The surge has already overwhelmed our primary backup. Refrigeration of lab specimens is failing. Without electrical reserves, all life support systems will collapse within hours." "The next supply shuttle doesn't arrive for 2 sols," Joran added quietly. Mara stepped forward, her expression calm despite the crisis unfolding. "I might have a solution. Back on Earth, we used salt batteries to—" "Absolutely not," Dr. Salran cut her off, his normally violet skin darkening to indigo with agitation. "I will not have untested Earth methods contaminating our sterile environment. We will reconnect using standard protocols." The camp alarms blared for 20 seconds before dying with a whimper. Oppressive heat bloomed inside the dome as cooling systems ground to a halt. Within minutes, everyone abandoned non-essential tasks, clustering near emergency power consoles that offered no respite. Dr. Salran ordered his graduate assistants to attempt a high-power reactor reboot, though Mara could see from across the room that the primary generator had molten solder and fused circuits. Such damage couldn't be repaired without replacement parts. There are old salt field manuals from previous survey teams, Mara suggested. If we consulted those. Your primitive methods have no place here. Dr. Salran dismissed her with a wave. This is precisely why human engineers are considered technologically stunted compared to proper xenophysicists. We need advanced solutions, not folk remedies. Mara felt the sting of his words but said nothing. Instead, she caught Joran's eye and tilted her head toward the storage bay. The Onyxian linguist nodded almost imperceptibly. While the others gathered around Dr. Salran, Mara and Joran slipped away to a dusty storeroom. Inside, they found what she had hoped for: salt bricks kept as mineral samples, distilled water containers for lab use, and a spool of copper wiring labeled expendable. "What exactly are you planning?" Joran asked, his transparent skin revealing accelerated heart rates. "The simplest battery in human history," Mara replied, gathering supplies. "Salt water conducts electricity. Two different metals in a saline solution create an electrochemical reaction. It won't power the whole camp, but it might give us emergency lighting until we figure something else out." Joran's expression shifted to concern. "Dr. Salran will never approve this. He's explicitly banned any methods that contradict his theory of absolute salinity death." Mara paused, her hands full of copper coils. "Do you think he'd rather be right or alive?" Before Joran could answer, the door slid open to reveal a worried Mikal xenobiologist, their tentacled appendages writhing with distress. "The microbial cultures in cold storage are dying," they reported. "Ambient temperature has reached 45 degrees Celsius and rising. Without refrigeration, we'll lose decades of research specimens." Mara and Joran exchanged glances. The stakes had just risen exponentially. Back in the main hub, the camp medic confirmed everyone's worst fears. "If temperatures reach 60 degrees Celsius, we face not just specimen loss, but human and alien heat stroke. We have perhaps 12 hours before conditions become lethal." Mara approached Ashilari, Dr. Salran's assistant. "I need access to the lab's copper coil spools and distilled water supply," she requested quietly. The assistant's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "For what purpose?" "A small experiment that might restore emergency lighting." "Professor Salran explicitly banned any archaic methods," Ashilari replied coldly, "especially those involving salt solutions that might contaminate our specimens." "What specimens?" Mara challenged, gesturing toward the failing cooling units. "They'll all be dead by morning without power. And your human folk remedy might kill them faster through cross-contamination," Ashilari countered. "The professor has studied salt toxicity for 80 years. Your Earth training barely qualifies you to clean our equipment." Mara felt heat rise to her face that had nothing to do with the failing environmental controls. "Those folk remedies saved thousands after the Iceland eruption destroyed our power grid. Simple chemistry works whether you believe in it or not." Their argument drew attention, with several researchers turning to watch. Dr. Salran approached, his tall frame towering over Mara. "You are disrupting our emergency protocols," he said coldly. "Return to your assigned station and await instructions." Mara stood her ground. "Sir, with respect, I've worked survival scenarios like this before. A basic salt battery could—" "Enough!" Dr. Salran's voice reverberated through the lab. "Your primitive methods represent everything wrong with human approaches to xenoscience. We will solve this crisis through proper channels." The camp's 2 security drones, normally hovering sentinels by the main airlock, lay offline from the power surge. Without them, the camp relied solely on Dr. Salran's authority, an authority that now seemed more concerned with methodology than survival. That night, as temperatures continued to rise, Mara lay awake in her bunk, torn between respect for authority and the certainty that she could help. Memories of her training on Earth surfaced, deploying salt batteries after a volcanic eruption, destroyed regional power, saving dozens of refugees trapped in emergency shelters. "Am I really the solution this camp needs?" she whispered to herself. "Or just a misguided veteran clinging to old methods?" The beads of sweat forming on her forehead gave her the answer she needed. Shortly after midnight, Joran appeared at her door with Luma, the fluoro-reptilian geochemist, in tow. "We brought you something," Joran whispered, producing small scraps of conductive alloy and magnesium tubing clearly taken from sealed crash cart supplies. "Sal Rand's hubris will kill us all," Luma added, her scales now a deep burgundy of determination. "I've monitored the specimen refrigeration units. We've lost nearly 20% of our samples already." Mara accepted their contraband with a solemn nod. "I'll need somewhere to work undisturbed." "There's a maintenance alcove near the southern salt flats access," Luma suggested. "It's rarely monitored." Under cover of darkness, Mara set up her makeshift laboratory. She mixed salt crystals from a ration pack with distilled water in a cracked comm module dish, inserting strips of copper and zinc she'd scavenged. The physics was elementary. 2 different metals in a salt solution would create a basic electrochemical cell, generating a tiny electrical current. By dawn, her handheld scanner, powerless for 20 minutes, glowed faintly when attached to her rudimentary cell. Mara clutched it triumphantly, exhaustion momentarily forgotten as the small device hummed to life. Her triumph was short-lived. When she returned to the main dome, she found the camp medic administering emergency cooling measures to 2 research assistants. The corrosive salt vapor from the cracks in the salt crust had seeped into the dome's ventilation shafts overnight, eating through secondary filters. "The lab animals are dying," the medic reported grimly. "Unintended contamination has breached the sterile environment." Mara's heart sank as she realized the implications. Her own salt experiments, if vented through the same system, might accelerate the contamination. Should she risk further salt usage to power the main generator, potentially killing rare microbes she'd been sent to help preserve? Or find a way to isolate her cells from the labs? The ethical quandary gnawed at her as the second day of crisis dawned. Outside, nature seemed determined to compound their troubles. A sudden sandstorm whipped across the salt fields, knocking out the dome's emergency solar array backup. Temperatures continued to rise. Psychometric sensors forecast an approaching thermal trough. If heat reached 60 degrees C inside the dome, crew quarters and cryostorage would fail irreversibly. To make matters worse, the camp's fusion reactor's coolant loop sprung a leak. The backup batteries used to power its control circuits were drained by the storm turbine's self-repair attempts. Nothing was working. Dr. Salran called an emergency meeting in what had once been the mess hall, but now served as an impromptu command center. His normally immaculate appearance had deteriorated, his violet skin now ashy gray from heat stress and dehydration. "All non-essential movement is restricted," he announced. "To preserve oxygen and reduce ambient heat, personnel will remain in designated zones only." When the meeting concluded, he added, "Any improvised solution that threatens microbe viability is strictly forbidden. We cannot risk losing unique specimens to contamination." The assistant xenobiologists dutifully locked the lab doors on his orders, effectively cutting off Mara's access to better metals and equipment. The hierarchy remained intact, even as the crisis deepened. In her cramped sleeping quarters, Mara closed her eyes, haunted by flashbacks to her Earth childhood. She remembered her family's first salt cell experiments after a devastating flood had knocked out power to their settlement for weeks. Her father's patient hands guiding hers as they wrapped copper wire around makeshift electrodes. The tears of joy when the first light had flickered to life. But alongside these memories came newer ones. Her mentor at the Galactic University weeping when contaminated cultures were lost after an atmospheric breach. Years of careful collection and preservation, destroyed in moments. Is saving human researchers worth sacrificing unique extraterrestrial life forms? She asked herself. The question had no simple answer, but she knew that survival of the entire camp, including the xenobiology mission, required restoring minimal power first. Dead researchers couldn't preserve any specimens. That night, under cover of darkness, Mara and Joran executed their most daring plan yet. They broke into the sealed, arcane materials locker, retrieving high-gauge copper coils from a dormant comm uplink, thin sheets of magnesium alloy from emergency repair kits, and a set of desiccation canisters containing purified salt. While Luma and Joran stood watch, Mara constructed a multi-cell salt battery array in a hidden alcove beneath the dome floor. She draped a tent flap over the workspace to keep stray dust out, working by the light of a single emergency hand torch. "Connect the positive terminal here," she murmured to herself. "Negative to the common ground." Basic chemistry, taught to human children for centuries, might now save an interstellar research mission. The moment of truth arrived when she hooked her array to a small heater to test the current. For a split second, the heating element glowed red. Success. But then the brine overheated, causing a small steam explosion that broke her copper wire connections. Mara barely managed to shield her face as hot brine splashed across her workbench, the sizzling liquid narrowly missing her eyes. The accident nearly revealed her location: a security drone, partially recharged by Dr. Salron's team, whirred past the corridor just seconds after she extinguished her torch. Mara held her breath until the mechanical sentinel moved on. By morning, Dr. Salron, furious at the burning smell of overheated salt that lingered in the lower corridors, demanded an immediate search for saboteurs. "Someone is conducting unauthorized experiments," he declared. "This poses an unacceptable risk to our specimens and protocols." He tightened restrictions further. All off-lab passages were locked. Drones patrolled subterranean tunnels with thermal sensors. That evening, Joran found Mara in a maintenance shaft, her face streaked with salt residue and sweat. "Perhaps we should try the hydrogen fuel cell instead," he suggested. "Dr. Salran might approve that method." Mara shook her head firmly. "The hydrogen cells are too depleted. They were designed as backups for the backup, not primary power. Only salt remains in quantity. And it will work. I just need to manage the heat buildup better." Time was running out. Only 2 days remained before the scheduled supply shuttle arrival. Without power, surviving conditions would drop below safety thresholds, risking multiple heat crash deaths among the research team. Mara formulated her final plan: build a 12-cell salt battery, connected in series, to power the grain separator plasma pump designed for extracting saline mineral byproducts. If she could get that running, she could divert its residual kinetic charge into the camp's main condenser coolant loop, reinstating minimal life support. "Even if Salron calls me a heretic," she whispered to Joran as they parted ways, "I'll try." As dawn broke on the third day, Mara finalized her 12-cell array in the hidden workshop. She had just connected the last wire when the shadows at the entrance elongated. Dr. Salran stood there, flanked by 3 security drones whose optical sensors fixed on her improvised setup. "I should have known," the alien professor said, his voice ice-cold despite the suffocating heat. "A human, rejecting proper protocol, gambling with sacred xenobiological specimens, and placed us all in mortal peril with your heresy. Cease this madness immediately." Mara stood slowly, hands steady despite her racing heart. "My heresy is every human who survived death worlds on Earth," she replied, voice calm but resolute. "I refuse to watch everyone die because you, a proud xenobiologist, won't admit that simple salt chemistry can work." Dr. Salran's face contorted with rage. "Security drones! Confiscate this contraband and escort Engineer Langford to containment." One drone's mechanical arm extended toward Mara's array. In that precise moment, outside, a sudden microquake shook the camp foundations. A nearby salt formation cracked open, sending a plume of scalding saline vapor through a ventilation duct directly into the workshop. The caustic cloud enveloped Dr. Salran, who stumbled backward, choking on breathable air as the camp alarm shrieked its warning. Mara seized the moment. In one fluid motion, she yanked her battery pack free, lunged past the momentarily confused drones, and raced down the corridor toward the grain separator plasma pump. Her lungs burned from the exertion and lingering salt particles, but adrenaline propelled her forward. Reaching the pump's control port, she attached the 12-cell array with trembling fingers. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the machinery sputtered, hummed, and a faint glow emanated from its status panel. Emboldened, Mara yanked the main cable that ran from the pump's residual coil into the camp's primary condenser. The effect was immediate and electric. Emergency lights throughout the dome snapped on at 10% capacity. Life support fans wheezed to life, their initial rotation sending dust motes swirling in the dim illumination. A trickle of coolant began flowing through transparent conduits overhead. The headless glare in the biology wing temporarily returned, casting enough light for researchers to see their endangered specimens. Security drones froze in place, their control circuits recovering from the electromagnetic surge. Dr. Salran staggered into the pump room, one hand pressed against his respiratory membranes as he breathed in cooler, filtered air. His eyes, wide with disbelief, fixed on Mara's makeshift array, the source of their salvation. Over the next hour, the camp's ambient temperature dropped from 65 degrees C to 55 degrees C, then to 45 degrees C, and finally stabilized around 35 degrees C. In the microbiology wing, surviving bacterial cultures flared into renewed activity under the restored refrigeration. Security drones powered back on under sealed override protocols. Dr. Salran ordered them to stand down, his voice hushed and uncertain. Luma and Joran sneaked into the newly powered lab, witnessing salt-tolerant archaea glowing under microscope fluorescence, living proof that not everything in the salt fields was dead, as Dr. Salran had claimed for so long. Ashilari, who had initially been furious at Mara's insubordination, approached her in the corridor outside the pump room. "I was wrong," the assistant admitted, head bowed slightly. "I let academic pride block a solution that might have been implemented hours earlier. You saved us all." Mara nodded, too exhausted for triumph. "Let's focus on maintaining what we have until help arrives." Dr. Salran appeared last, his tall frame silhouetted in the doorway. He stood watching silently as Mara adjusted the flow regulator on her salt battery array. When she finally looked up, she found his expression unreadable. "I once dismissed any possibility of life in extreme salinity," he said quietly, his academic certainty shattered. "I was wrong, and I endangered everyone by refusing even to consider alternatives. I apologize. Engineer Langford." Mara wiped sweat and salt residue from her face. "We all learn," she replied simply. "Now, let's fix everything that's broken, together." Over the next few hours, Mara organized a minimal power rotation to sustain critical systems until rescue arrived. 6 hours on for life support, 6 hours on for refrigeration, 6 hours on for communications uplink. She assigned teams led by Luma, Joran, and Ashilari to maintain and replicate additional salt cells, ensuring continuous energy. The camp transformed from a rigid hierarchy to a cooperative micro-society, unified by necessity rather than formal rank. Researchers who had previously ignored Mara now sought her guidance, noting her methods in their own journals. When the supply shuttle finally arrived, engineers marveled at the improvised system that had kept the camp operational. They installed a pyrosolar stabilizer that incorporated salt cell backup units, an innovation directly inspired by Mara's emergency solution. The dome's infrastructure was upgraded to resist future thermal shocks and saline contamination. Weeks later, Dr. Salran stood before the Galactic University Senate in a formal holoconference. His prepared statement represented the most significant reversal of his distinguished career. "I wish to formally endorse the Langford Protocol," he announced, his voice steady despite the murmurs his words provoked. "This new standard recognizes low-tech, Earth-derived survival methods alongside our advanced technologies. Simple salt batteries and biocontamination checks should be incorporated into all frontier research stations." The Senate members exchanged glances, surprised by the renowned xenobiologist's change of heart. One elder Quintari senator raised a tendril. "And what of your decades of research suggesting no life can survive in extreme salinity?" Dr. Salran gestured to a holographic display that materialized beside him. It showed microscopic organisms swimming in a highly saline medium. "I present to you Langfordia salinaria, a previously undocumented extremophile discovered on Ashera 7th. These specimens not only survived our power failure, but actually thrived once Engineer Langford restored minimal electricity to their environment." In the audience, Mara sat quietly, still uncomfortable with the attention. Her field report had been codified as Section 9.4, Salt Field Chapter, in the university's Survival Engineering Manual, ensuring future explorers would have access to these fundamental techniques. After the conference, Mara was offered permanent tenure at the university, a prestigious position that would have secured her professional future. To everyone's surprise, she declined, choosing instead to remain a planetary consultant who helped frontier camps survive in hostile environments. "Your expertise could advance our theoretical understanding," the university chancellor argued. Mara smiled politely. "I'm more useful in the field. Theory becomes real when lives depend on it." In a personal letter to her Earth mentor, she later wrote, "Sometimes the smallest innovation can tip the balance between life and oblivion. A salt crystal, water, and two different metals created the spark that saved not just our lives, but unique organisms we'd never have discovered otherwise." Dr. Arvik Salran, meanwhile, found himself humbled but renewed in scientific curiosity. Rather than retreating in embarrassment, he embarked on a series of expeditions across other dead worlds, searching for overlooked extremophiles. His latest publication, Life Amidst the Salts, a Reappraisal, had become required reading in xenobiology programs throughout the galaxy. Joran, Luma, and Ashilari, once skeptical of Mara's methods, formed the core of a small, salt-field open-source energy initiative that spread low-tech survival techniques to other frontier researchers. Their motto, borrowed from Mara: "Simple solutions endure when complexity fails." 6 months after the crisis, Mara stood alone on the salt flats of Ashera 7th, watching twin suns set behind violet dunes. The camp behind her had been expanded, with new greenhouses housing the glowing microbial blooms discovered in the wake of the power failure. What Dr. Salran had once declared a lifeless wasteland now served as a laboratory for studying resilient extremophiles. She breathed deeply, tasting the salt on the air, no longer a harbinger of death, but a reminder of life's tenacity. Her compad beeped softly, displaying a faint radar ping detected in a neighboring salt field. Another anomaly, another mystery waiting to be solved. Mara tucked the pad into her satchel and headed toward a distant dune, ready for the next challenge. Behind her, the dome's lights, powered in part by an array of salt batteries, glowed steadily against the deepening twilight. A beacon of ingenuity in a world once thought barren of all possibility. The rigid academic orthodoxy that had nearly doomed them all had given way to a new paradigm, one that respected both cutting-edge technology and fundamental principles, alien wisdom and human practicality. No environment was truly dead, only unexamined. And as for Mara Langford, planetary survivalist and reluctant hero, her legacy would outlive her in every frontier outpost that installed a simple salt battery as backup, in every research team that thought twice before declaring any environment truly lifeless. The universe, like life itself, favored those adaptable enough to embrace both complexity and simplicity, and humble enough to admit when they were wrong. 3 weeks later, Dr. Salran's graduate students gathered in the newly renovated xenobiology lab, carefully tending cultures of microorganisms once thought impossible. Above their workstations hung a small, framed piece of copper wire, the remnant of Mara's first salt cell attempt. "Remember," Dr. Salran told them as he made his rounds, "theory guides but evidence decides. Never become so attached to your hypothesis that you ignore contradictory data or simple solutions." In the engineering bay, Mara's original 12-cell array had been preserved behind transparent aluminum, a teaching tool for new arrivals. Beside it stood a plaque that read, "The Langford Protocol. When complexity fails, return to fundamentals." And across the galaxy, on worlds with environments once dismissed as dead zones, researchers began looking with fresh eyes, seeking life where dogma had declared it impossible. Salt flats, acid lakes, methane oceans, everywhere. The paradigm shifted from certainty to curiosity. Back on Earth, the Emergency Research Directive received Mara's full report. Within months, planetary survival kits were redesigned to include basic components for salt batteries alongside high-tech gear. Dual-approach methodology became standard training for all outbound engineers. The Galactic University Senate established a new research division, Extreme Environment Reassessment, dedicated to revisiting worlds previously classified as biologically inert. Dr. Salran, once the staunchest defender of salinity death theory, became its honorary chairman, a position he accepted with newfound humility. "We stand corrected by evidence," he announced at the inauguration ceremony, "and strengthened by that correction." For Mara, fame remained an uncomfortable fit. She continued her work on frontier worlds, moving from crisis to crisis, teaching settlers and researchers alike how to survive when technology failed them. Her hands remained calloused from practical work, her approach grounded in reality rather than theory. "Earth still has some tricks to teach the galaxy," she often told new teams, "if we're humble enough to remember them." And on Ishera's 7th, beneath the white crust of the salt flats, once declared utterly lifeless, new species continued to emerge, each one a living refutation of absolute certainty, each one a testament to life's persistent ingenuity. Just like the human engineer who had refused to let an alien professor's dogma determine their fate.